Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are digging into one of the 17th century's most fascinating and honestly complicated figures, Andrew Marvell. This was a guy who was a poet of incredible passion, a seriously sharp politician, and a quiet philosopher, all wrapped up in one. He basically lived at the intersection of love and war. So let's just jump right in. The thing that makes Andrew Marvell so interesting, the real puzzle here, is this massive contrast. You've got the same mind that wrote one of the most famous, most brilliant seduction poems in the entire English language, and that same guy was also neck-deep in the political chaos of the English Civil War. How does that work? All right, let's start with the role he's most famous for, the master of lyric poetry. And you really can't talk about Marvell the poet without talking about his masterpiece, To His Coy Mistress. This poem is the perfect example of his signature style. At its core, the poem is a classic carpe diem argument, seize the day. It's this witty, urgent, and just incredibly clever plea from a speaker to his lover, basically begging her to drop the shyness and just enjoy life and love before, time runs out for them both. And what's so cool is how he builds his case. It's like a lawyer's argument. He structures it in 3 parts. First, he goes way over the top, describing how he would spend hundreds of years admiring every part of her if, they had all the time in the world. Then, he slams on the brakes and hits her with the cold, hard reality of death. And finally, he brings it home with this passionate call to action. They have to seize their love right now while they still can. Okay, but this is where the story takes a turn and gets way more complex. Because the guy who could blend all this brainy stuff with such raw, sensual appeal, he wasn't just some lover hanging out in a garden. He was a major player in a country that was literally tearing itself apart with war and revolution. And that brings us to his public life. Marvell wasn't just a poet. He was a member of parliament and a cutting political satirist. So now his writing isn't for quiet reflection. It's a tool, and sometimes it's a weapon, wielded right in the middle of the political arena. Yeah, he was deeply involved in the messy politics of his day. As an ally of Oliver Cromwell, his writing often defended the new government and threw some serious shade at the monarchy. He took that same logical, persuasive mind we saw in his love poetry and aimed it right at the political battlefield. And this quote shows you just how nuanced he was. In his famous poem about Cromwell, Marvell doesn't just write a simple praise song. Nope. Instead, he paints this incredibly complex picture of a leader who is both a history-making hero and a potentially dangerous tyrannical force. It's this masterful deep dive into the nature of power itself. But hold on, beyond the bedroom and beyond Parliament, Marvell had a third world he explored, the quiet, thoughtful world of nature. For him, a garden wasn't just a garden. It was a space for some seriously profound spiritual and intellectual thinking. And he used nature to wrestle with huge ideas. In one poem, The Garden, he presents it as this perfect escape, a place to find peace away from all the human chaos. But then, in another poem, he completely flips it and attacks those perfectly manicured gardens, seeing them as a symbol of how corrupt and artificial people can be. So how do you connect all these different versions of Marvell? The passionate poet, the shrewd politician, the nature philosopher? Well, the thread that ties it all together is his intellectual style. Marvell was a metaphysical poet through and through. The metaphysical style is all about mashing together deep philosophical thinking with raw emotion. It's known for being super witty and for using these things called conceits, which are basically these wild, surprising metaphors that connect 2 totally different things to help you think about life's big questions in a new way. These were the tools in Marvell's toolbox, you could say. That same witty argument he used to try and persuade a lover, he sharpened it into biting satire to attack the government. Those same elaborate metaphors he used to describe beauty, he used them to unpack the complicated and kind of scary character of Oliver Cromwell. He proves the same mind can master both the private world of the heart and the public world of power. So what's the big takeaway here? Why are we still talking about this guy centuries later? I think it comes down to his incredible depth and, more than anything, his versatility. The man simply refused to be put in a box. This chart really sums it up perfectly. Look at the range. He took on the biggest themes of human life, from the most private and personal feelings to huge public and political struggles. Reading his work is like getting a panoramic view of this 17th century mind, a mind wrestling with love, power, nature, and what it even means to be human. Ultimately, Marvell's work doesn't give you easy answers. It invites you to think about these huge questions for yourself. He shows us that a single person can contain multitudes, and that's what makes him so much more than a one-poem wonder. So the only real question left is, which side of this brilliant, complicated mind are you going to explore